He entered into the diplomatic service, where he served for 11 years at the Negotiation Affairs Department of the PLO in Ramallah, most recently as its deputy head and coordinator general. He had first joined the Negotiation Affairs Department in 1998, when it was then headed by the current Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and he served as Director General until March of 2008. In addition to his work there, Ambassador Areikat was responsible for overseeing the work of the Negotiation Support Unit, which provided legal, policy, and communication and technical support to the Palestinian negotiating teams. And I might note that he served on a number of negotiating teams as well. For a while at Orient House, which was the Palestinian Center in Jerusalem, he served as spokesperson for the late Faisal Husseini. Later, he was a desk officer for the U.S., Canada, Australia, and South Africa at Orient House. But he also took part in many negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis at Beit Hanun in Gaza and Taba in 1996, in Jerusalem in 1997, and he was an official member of the Palestinian delegation at the Wye River negotiations in 1998. It's a great pleasure for me, and I'm sure for all of us, to welcome Ambassador Areikat here this afternoon.
Thank you. Just to deal with this.
Let me just put it on. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you very much. Let's see if this works. Thank you, Dr. Smith, Professor Sasser. It's a pleasure to meet both of you. Christian, thank you for following up on the invitation after we met in Washington, D.C., 2 months ago?
2 months ago.
2 months ago. It's a pleasure to be here, although I'm a graduate of Arizona State University, but it is an honor to be at the University of Arizona, and we do follow up on your football team, and you are doing much better than Arizona State this year. So in the end, it all boils down to Arizona. When you play with Arizona State, I may root for Arizona State, but when you play with an outside team, we root for the University of Arizona. This is not our topic today. But I am here to talk about the myths of past Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. And I will, of course, try to cover as much as I can in the 20 to 25 minutes that I've been given. And then I will have the opportunity to have a discussion with the two distinguished gentlemen to my right. And after that, we will open the floor for questions from the audience. The Palestinians and the Israelis signed their first peace treaty in 1993, the Oslo Accords, that were held secretly. The Palestinians and the Israelis held secret talks between the two sides, while at the same time the United States was trying to broker an agreement between the PLO and Israel. And on September 13th, 1993, here in the United States, in Washington, under the auspices of President Bill Clinton, late Prime Minister Rabin and the late President Yasser Arafat signed the historic Oslo Accords that were hoped to have ushered a new age in the relationship between the two sides. And the Oslo Accords were meant to be as an interim agreement, not a permanent status agreement. So it was given a period of 5 years, and by 1999 the two sides were expected to have been able to conclude a final or a permanent status agreement. As you all know, we are in 2010 today, and there is still no permanent status agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Some of the problems of the previous agreements that we signed with Israel can be summed up in the following, what I call shortcomings or flaws in the agreements that the PLO signed with Israel. The first one, which I mentioned earlier, the nature of the agreement was interim, and it was supposed to be a transitional agreement to help the two parties build confidence and trust before they can start discussing the more important issues or the sensitive issues that they both agreed to defer until after the end of the 5-year period. I personally believe that that was a major mistake, because instead of building trust and confidence between the two sides in the period from 1993 to 1994 to 1999, the actions on the ground and the violence on the ground dictated the course of the political discussions between the two sides. And instead of bringing them closer, it actually increased the divide between the two, and that's why in 1999 we could not conclude the permanent status agreement, because that transitional period did not create the atmosphere conducive to reaching an agreement. So the transitional and the interim nature of the agreement was one major shortcoming and one major flaw that we are trying to avoid now in our negotiations with the Israelis by refusing any more interim or transitional agreements and going immediately to the permanent status and to the final status negotiations. The second major shortcoming was the ambiguity of the agreement. The two sides felt maybe that constructive ambiguity would be helpful for the two sides to interpret the agreement, the way they want to interpret it, and that proved to be a very, very major mistake, because when both disagreed on the interpretation, that constructive ambiguity was rather counterproductive instead of being helpful, and it did not help the two sides implement their side of the deal about that was stipulated in the agreement. The third major shortcoming was the absence of a monitoring and verification mechanism. The two sides signed the agreement. They both accepted to implement certain obligations, but there was no third party or neutral party to verify and monitor the implementation of the agreement. So the Palestinians will accuse the Israelis that they have not implemented, the Israelis will accuse the Palestinians that have not implemented, and they will all start pointing fingers, blaming each other, but no third party or neutral party was present to decide who was to blame for the lack of the implementation of the agreement or for failure to implement the agreement. And this is really, this was really a major shortcoming, because again, in our discussions today, we are insisting on a role for the third party, especially when it comes to the security arrangements that we are proposing with the Israeli side, and we can expand on that later, maybe in the question and answer issue. The fourth shortcoming was the absence of a clear time frame. Yes, we did agree that the agreement will be only for 5 years from 1994 to 1999, but when the parties, and especially in this case Israel, failed to meet its deadlines and its obligations to turn over more land to the Palestinians, to be under the control of the Palestinians, there was again nothing in the agreement that emphasized the importance of sticking and adhering to the deadlines that were agreed between the two parties. So each party acted as if this process or that process was an open-ended process without sticking to any deadlines, which kept it going on for a long period of time, and we found ourselves in the end engaged in a process that did not produce any peace. So, these major shortcomings, we are taking them into account in our current negotiations, or hopefully if they resume, but in our discussions with the Israelis and with the United States and the international community, that we cannot aim for getting a transitional agreement or an interim agreement anymore. We need to really deal with the major issues head on, and these major issues include Jerusalem, refugees, settlements, security, water, and borders. And these are the 6 permanent status issues that we Palestinians will be discussing with the Israelis in the event of if the negotiations are resumed, and if we can remove the hurdles that Israel has placed in